Welcome to Visual Fantasy Book Recommendations, the channel dedicated to fantasy and science fiction book summaries, reviews, and recommendations. It is very helpful if you hit the like, comment, subscribe, and share. Help build my channel, and let's take a look into the best fantasy and sci-fi realms out there. Welcome to Visual Fantasy Book Recommendations, where we explore the universe of science fiction and fantasy literature one book at a time. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a work that didn't just change science fiction, it fundamentally reimagined how we think about the future of human civilization. What if mathematics could predict the fall of empires? What if a single brilliant scientist could foresee the collapse of a galactic civilization spanning millions of worlds? And more importantly, what if he could do something about it? Isaac Asimov's Foundation doesn't just ask these questions. It builds an entire universe around the answers, creating what many consider the greatest science fiction epic ever written. Published in 1951, Foundation emerged from a series of stories that appeared in astounding science fiction magazine during the 1940s. But don't let its pulp origins fool you. This is a work of staggering ambition and intellectual depth that tackles nothing less than the patterns of history itself, wrapped in the thrilling package of galactic politics, religious manipulation, and economic warfare. Asimov presents us with a far-future galactic empire that has ruled over millions of inhabited worlds for thousands of years. But empires, like all human institutions, are mortal. The brilliant scientist Hari Seldon has developed a mathematical science called psychohistory that can predict the broad sweeps of future history when applied to large populations, and his calculations reveal a terrifying truth: the empire is doomed to fall. However, Seldon refuses to accept this fate passively. Through careful planning, he establishes a foundation at the edge of the galaxy, a repository of human knowledge designed to preserve civilization and guide humanity through the coming dark ages. Foundation follows this outpost as it navigates a series of existential challenges that will determine not just its survival, but the future shape of human civilization. What makes this premise so compelling is his treatment of these challenges not as random disasters, but as predictable problems that Seldon's science has foreseen. Each crisis has solutions, but the people of the Foundation must discover them for themselves, without knowing they're following a predetermined historical pattern. It's a masterful blend of determinism and free will that raises profound questions about historical inevitability and human agency. The structure spans roughly 2 centuries, showing how the Foundation evolves and adapts as it faces different types of threats and opportunities. We witness transformations in leadership, strategy, and the very nature of power itself as circumstances change and old methods become obsolete. Asimov's approach to character is unique and often misunderstood. Critics sometimes dismiss his characters as underdeveloped, but this misses the point entirely. In the universe of Foundation, individuals matter less than the historical forces they represent and the different approaches to power they embody. The political leaders we encounter are pragmatic figures who understand that survival requires constant adaptation and strategic thinking. They represent the triumph of intelligence over brute force, of careful planning over impulsive action. These are people who see the bigger picture and are willing to make difficult decisions for long-term benefit. The scientists and academics face the challenge of translating pure knowledge into practical power. They must learn to navigate political realities while maintaining their intellectual integrity, often discovering that the pursuit of truth and the requirements of survival don't always align neatly. The religious figures, both genuine believers and calculated manipulators, explore how spiritual authority can be used as a tool of governance. Asimov examines the complex relationship between faith, power, and social control, without dismissing the genuine human need for meaning and community. The merchants and traders represent economic pragmatism and the power of mutual benefit. They understand that creating value for others can be more effective than taking by force, and that interdependence can create stronger bonds than conquest. The genius of Asimov's approach is that these characters feel like real historical figures viewed from a distance. We see them at crucial moments, making decisions that will echo through generations, but we experience them primarily through their actions and choices rather than their inner emotional lives. At its core, Foundation grapples with questions that extend far beyond science fiction. The central theme revolves around the tension between idealism and pragmatism, between maintaining principles and adapting to survive. The Foundation begins with noble goals but must constantly evolve its methods as it encounters new challenges. The relationship between knowledge and power runs throughout the work. Asimov explores how scientific understanding can be translated into political influence, how expertise relates to authority, and whether those with knowledge have obligations to those without it. These questions feel remarkably relevant in our current age of expertise, misinformation, and democratic tensions. Religion as both genuine belief and tool of governance emerges as another crucial theme. Asimov examines how spiritual movements can preserve or transmit important values and knowledge, while also serving practical political purposes. This isn't presented as cynical manipulation, but as a complex reality of how societies function and maintain cohesion. Economic interdependence and the subtle forms of power it creates anticipate many modern concerns about globalization. Asimov shows how control over essential technologies or resources can create influence more durable than military conquest, and how economic relationships can bind societies together in ways that political treaties cannot. Perhaps most fascinating is the theme of historical patterns versus individual choice. The concept of psychohistory suggests that large-scale social trends are predictable and largely unavoidable. Yet the Foundation's success depends on individuals making the right choices at crucial moments. This creates a philosophical tension about whether we are the masters of our fate or servants of larger historical forces. Asimov's prose style has often been characterized as spare and functional, but this simplicity serves his larger purposes brilliantly. The clean, unadorned language allows complex ideas to emerge clearly without getting bogged down in atmospheric description or stylistic flourishes. This is science fiction as intellectual exercise, where concepts take precedence over mood or setting. The episodic structure, inherited from the work's origins as separate magazine stories, becomes a strength rather than a weakness. Each section functions as a complete problem and solution cycle while contributing to the larger arc of societal development. This allows Asimov to explore different facets of power and different approaches to maintaining civilization. Dialogue serves primarily to advance ideas and reveal different philosophical approaches rather than provide naturalistic character interaction. This can feel formal to modern readers, but it reflects Asimov's focus on these figures as embodiments of different worldviews and strategic approaches. The pacing reflects Asimov's emphasis on intellectual rather than emotional engagement. Tension comes not from physical danger or personal relationships, but from the challenge of solving seemingly impossible political and social problems. How do you maintain civilization when surrounded by hostile forces? Can economic pressure succeed where military force would fail? These questions drive the narrative with surprising urgency. Foundation emerged during the golden age of science fiction, when writers were establishing the intellectual foundations of the genre. Asimov drew inspiration from historical works about the fall of great civilizations, essentially asking what might happen if someone could predict and potentially guide such transitions on a galactic scale. The work reflects mid-20th century optimism about science and rational planning, yet it also carries more complex undertones about the corruption of ideals and the difficulty of maintaining principles under pressure. The Foundation's evolution from scientific institution to something quite different mirrors ongoing concerns about how institutions change over time. The influence of Foundation on subsequent science fiction and even real-world thinking cannot be overstated. The concept of psychohistory inspired developments in social science, economics, and complexity theory. The work's examination of how societies adapt and evolve remains relevant to contemporary discussions about technological change, globalization, and social resilience. Foundation rewards readers who enjoy thinking about large-scale social and political processes. Those who prefer character-driven narratives or emotionally intense plots may find it intellectually engaging but emotionally distant. However, readers interested in politics, economics, history, or social science will discover a work of remarkable sophistication. The episodic structure makes it accessible to busy readers. Each section can be absorbed as a complete story while contributing to the larger whole. The scientific concepts, while central to the premise, are explained clearly enough for non-technical readers to follow and appreciate. The themes of adaptation, the relationship between knowledge and power, and the challenge of maintaining civilization remain compelling across generations. While some of the specific technological predictions may feel dated, the underlying questions about governance, expertise, and social change continue to resonate. Foundation stands as perhaps the most intellectually ambitious work in science fiction history. Asimov created not just a story but a new way of thinking about human civilization, historical change, and the relationship between individual action and social forces. While the prose may lack the literary polish of more recent science fiction, the underlying vision remains unmatched in its scope and philosophical depth. The work succeeds brilliantly as both entertainment and thought experiment. Readers will find themselves questioning their assumptions about progress, leadership, and the role of planning in human affairs. These aren't abstract philosophical questions. Asimov grounds them in concrete situations that feel remarkably relevant to contemporary concerns about expertise, democracy, and social adaptation. For anyone interested in science fiction's capacity to illuminate real-world issues, Foundation remains essential reading. It demonstrates the genre's unique ability to explore ideas too large or complex for conventional fiction, while never losing sight of the human dimensions of these cosmic questions. Imagine this. You've spent your entire life believing in an infallible plan, a mathematical blueprint that promises your civilization will survive any crisis and emerge stronger. Then, in a single devastating moment, that plan crumbles. The impossible happens. The unbeatable enemy appears. And suddenly, you realize that even the most brilliant minds in galactic history might have been wrong. Welcome to Foundation and Empire, Isaac Asimov's masterful second installment in what many consider the greatest science fiction saga ever written. This isn't just a story about spaceships and laser battles, though it has those in spades. This is a profound meditation on power, faith, and what happens when the very foundations of certainty are shaken to their core. Today, we're diving deep into why this 1952 classic continues to captivate readers more than 70 years after publication, and why it might be exactly the book you need right now. Foundation and Empire unfolds in Asimov's breathtaking galactic canvas, set thousands of years in the future when humanity has spread across the stars. The mighty galactic empire, which once ruled 25 million worlds, is crumbling into barbarism. Against this backdrop of decay, psychohistorian Hari Seldon established two foundations at opposite ends of the galaxy, scientific havens designed to preserve knowledge and rebuild civilization in a mere 1,000 years rather than 30,000. The novel splits into two distinct but interconnected stories. The first, The General, introduces us to Bel Rios, a brilliant imperial general who represents the Empire's last gasp of competence and ambition. Rios discovers the Foundation and recognizes both its threat and its potential. He's everything the decaying Empire is not: young, energetic, and devastatingly effective. The conflict that emerges isn't just military. It's a clash between dying grandeur and emerging hope. The second story, The Mule, shatters everything readers thought they knew about Seldon's plan. Enter a mysterious conqueror whose very existence seems to violate the laws of psychohistory. The Mule represents something Seldon never accounted for, the wild card that can derail the most carefully laid plans. Asimov's genius lies not in creating flashy heroes, but in crafting characters who embody the larger forces shaping their universe. Bel Rios emerges as one of science fiction's most compelling antagonists, a man you can't help but admire even as you root against him. He's trapped by the very system he serves with such distinction. His competence becomes his curse, his loyalty his downfall. Beta and Torin Darrell anchor the second story as newlyweds swept up in galactic events far beyond their control. They're ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances, and their relationship provides an emotional grounding that makes the cosmic stakes feel personal. Beta, in particular, evolves from a somewhat passive character into someone capable of making the hardest choices imaginable. Then there's Magnifico, the tragic clown whose presence weaves through the narrative like a discordant melody. Without spoiling anything, His character arc represents one of Asimov's most psychologically complex creations, a study in how trauma, power, and loneliness can twist even the most sympathetic soul. At its heart, Foundation and Empire grapples with the tension between determinism and free will. Seldon's psychohistory suggests that history follows predictable patterns, that the mass behavior of humanity can be mathematically modeled and controlled. But what happens when that certainty meets the chaos of individual choice? The novel explores whether any plan, no matter how brilliant, can account for every variable. The book also examines the nature of power and its corruption. The mule's abilities raise disturbing questions about consent, manipulation, and what it means to be truly free. In our current era of social media manipulation and psychological warfare, these themes feel remarkably prescient. Perhaps most powerfully, the novel deals with faith, not religious faith, but faith in systems, in plans, in the idea that someone somewhere has figured it all out. When that faith is shaken, how do people respond? Some despair, some adapt, and some discover strength they never knew they possessed. Asimov's prose style has sometimes been dismissed as workmanlike, but this misses the point entirely. His clear, unadorned writing serves the ideas perfectly, never getting in the way of the concepts he's exploring. Like the best science fiction, the style becomes invisible, allowing readers to become fully immersed in the world and its dilemmas. The author's background in chemistry shines through in his approach to plotting. Each story element is carefully balanced, with causes and effects that unfold with scientific precision. Yet beneath this logical structure lies genuine emotional depth. Asimov understood that the biggest ideas mean nothing without human stakes. The novel's structure, two novellas that complement and contrast each other, showcases Asimov's mastery of pacing and theme. The first story examines how systems fail from within, while the second explores how they can be destroyed from without. Together, they create a symphony of political and psychological insight. Foundation and Empire speaks directly to our contemporary anxieties about institutions, expertise, and the future. We live in an age when faith in institutions is crumbling, when the plans of experts are routinely upended by unforeseen events, when the very idea of objective truth is under assault. Asimov's exploration of these themes through the lens of galactic politics provides both perspective and comfort. The novel also offers a sophisticated view of leadership and power. In our current political climate, the contrast between Bel Rios' principled competence and the various corrupt officials he encounters feels particularly relevant. The book suggests that sometimes the greatest threats come not from evil, but from the collision of good intentions with impossible circumstances. Asimov wrote this book with a clear purpose: to explore the mechanisms of historical change and the role of the individual within larger social forces. He was deeply influenced by Edward Gibbon's Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and his Foundation series can be read as science fiction's answer to that historical masterwork. But Asimov wasn't content to simply retell history with ray guns. He used the vast scope of his galactic setting to examine timeless questions about civilization, progress, and human nature. The result is a work that functions simultaneously as adventure story, political thriller, and philosophical meditation. Foundation and Empire rewards multiple types of readers. Science fiction fans will appreciate the scope and vision, the way Asimov builds a believable galactic civilization and then tests it to its breaking point. Political junkies will find rich material in the book's exploration of power dynamics and institutional failure. But the novel also works for readers who don't typically enjoy science fiction. The focus on character psychology and political maneuvering makes it accessible to anyone interested in human nature and social dynamics. The absence of technobabble and the emphasis on ideas over gadgets broadens its appeal considerably. History buffs will particularly appreciate Asimov's treatment of civilizational decline and renewal. The book serves as a masterclass in how societies adapt, or fail to adapt, to changing circumstances. Foundation and Empire stands as a towering achievement in science fiction literature, a work that uses the infinite canvas of space and time to explore the most fundamental questions about human nature and society. Asimov created something rare, a book that works as both entertainment and education, that can be enjoyed for its adventure while appreciated for its ideas. The novel's enduring relevance lies in its recognition that no plan, no matter how sophisticated, can account for every possibility. Yet rather than counseling despair, it suggests that adaptability and human resilience may be more powerful than any blueprint. In our uncertain times, that's a message worth hearing. Whether you're a longtime science fiction reader or someone looking to understand why this genre matters, Foundation and Empire offers rewards that justify its classic status. It's a book that changes how you think about history, politics, and the future, and in the end, isn't that what the best literature should do? Imagine this: you're playing the most complex chess game imaginable. Your opponent, an invisible grandmaster who can read your mind, predict your every move, and has been planning this match for centuries. Oh, and the fate of the entire galaxy hangs in the balance. Sound intense? Welcome to Isaac Asimov's second Foundation, and trust me when I say this science fiction masterpiece will absolutely blow your mind. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to another episode where we explore the books that shape science fiction and fantasy as we know it. Today we're tackling the third installment of Asimov's legendary Foundation series, and let me tell you, this one is a wild ride. Whether you're a longtime fan of the series or someone who's never cracked open a sci-fi novel, stick around because we're about to explore why this book remains an absolute classic 70 years after it first hit shelves. And don't worry, we're keeping this completely spoiler-free, so you can dive into this masterpiece fresh after we're done. So what's Second Foundation all about? Well, imagine a galaxy in chaos. For those unfamiliar with the Foundation saga, here's the quick background. A brilliant mathematician named Hari Seldon developed something called psychohistory. Basically, he figured out how to predict the future of entire civilizations using mathematical formulas. Wild, right? Before the Galactic Empire collapsed, Seldon set up two foundations at opposite ends of the galaxy to preserve human knowledge and eventually rebuild civilization. The catch? Only one foundation knows about the other. Second Foundation picks up after the galaxy has been turned upside down by a character known as the Mule, a mutant with terrifying mental powers who could control human emotions and pretty much conquered everything in sight. The Mule broke all of Seldon's careful predictions, and now two desperate searches are underway. The Mule himself is hunting for this mysterious Second Foundation, and ironically, so are the surviving members of the First Foundation. Everyone wants to find these legendary guardians of Seldon's plan, but nobody knows where they are. The story brilliantly splits into two parallel narratives. We follow the Mule's obsessive quest alongside a young teenager named Arcadia Darrell. Yes, a 14-year-old girl becomes absolutely crucial to galactic politics, who gets caught up in a web of intrigue that spans star systems. There's espionage, there's warfare, there's mind-bending psychological manipulation, and underneath it all runs this constant question. Who's really in control? Are any of these characters making their own choices, or has everything been calculated by unseen puppet masters? All right, let's dig into what makes this book so remarkable, and honestly, there's so much to unpack here. First off, let's talk about Asimov's characters because they're genuinely fascinating. What's brilliant about this novel is how Asimov populates his galaxy with regular people. Scientists, bureaucrats, traders, even a farm representative, and shows how these ordinary individuals become pivotal in extraordinary circumstances. There's Dr. Darrell, a dedicated scientist wrestling with both professional challenges and single parenthood. There's Homer Munn, a librarian who stutters and second-guesses himself, but finds himself thrust into galactic intrigue. And then there's Arcadia. Can we just appreciate Arcadia for a moment? In 1953, Asimov created this clever, resourceful teenage girl who doesn't just tag along for the adventure. She actively shapes events through her intelligence and courage. She's reading spy novels and dreaming of adventure. Sure, but she's also sharp enough to outmaneuver adults who underestimate her. The way Asimov writes her feels remarkably authentic. She's got that teenage blend of confidence and insecurity, romanticism and pragmatism. She's not some implausibly mature kid. She actually feels 14 while still being genuinely impressive. What's really clever is how Asimov uses this diverse cast to explore a massive theme: the tension between individual agency and determinism. Every character in this book is constantly questioning whether their decisions are truly their own or whether they're being manipulated by forces beyond their comprehension. It creates this delicious paranoia that permeates the entire narrative. Can you trust your own thoughts? Your own motivations? When you're dealing with people who can literally adjust your emotional state or implant ideas in your mind, how do you know what's real? The conflict in Second Foundation operates on multiple levels, and that's part of what makes it so engaging. On the surface, you've got your space battles and political maneuvering. There's literally a war happening between Calgon and the Foundation. But the real conflict is psychological and philosophical. It's a battle of wits between people trying to find the Second Foundation and the Second Foundation trying to remain hidden while still protecting Seldon's plan. Every conversation becomes a potential chess match. Every decision could be exactly what the enemy wants you to do, or it could be the one move they didn't predict. Asimov structures this beautifully. The book is split into two parts, Search by the Mule and Search by the Foundation. And watching these parallel investigations unfold is absolutely gripping. The tension just ratchets up continuously because you're never quite sure who knows what, who's in control, or what's really happening behind the scenes. Now, let's talk about Asimov's writing style because it's something special. His prose is clean, efficient, almost conversational. He's not trying to dazzle you with flowery descriptions or complicated sentence structures. Instead, he focuses on ideas and dialogue, letting the concepts themselves carry the weight. The result is incredibly readable. This book just flows. You can easily lose an entire afternoon because you just want to read one more chapter. What's particularly impressive is how Asimov handles exposition. He's dealing with complex concepts here: psychohistory, encephalographic analysis, the mathematics of predicting human behavior on a galactic scale, but he makes it accessible. Characters explain things to each other in natural ways, and Asimov trusts his readers to keep up without dumbing anything down. The philosophical depth here is remarkable too. Asimov is wrestling with huge questions about free will, the ethics of manipulation, whether security justifies secrecy, and the price of peace. What right does any group have to guide civilization from the shadows, even with the best intentions? If you could prevent suffering by subtly influencing people's choices, would that be ethical? The book doesn't preach answers. It presents scenarios and lets readers grapple with these dilemmas themselves. There's also something beautifully metatextual about the whole thing. Asimov is writing about prediction and planning on a vast scale while simultaneously demonstrating his own masterful plotting. The way everything comes together at the end, and again, no spoilers, reflects the very themes the book explores. It's like he's showing you the architecture of great storytelling while telling a great story. So what was Asimov trying to achieve with Second Foundation? On one level, he's completing a trilogy, wrapping up story threads from the previous books. But there's more happening here. Asimov was writing in the early 1950s during the Cold War, an era obsessed with prediction, control, and unseen threats. The anxiety about hidden enemies and psychological manipulation that runs through this book definitely reflects those contemporary concerns. But Asimov's also exploring something timeless: the human need to feel in control of our destinies versus the reality that we're all influenced by forces we don't fully understand, whether that's social conditioning, economic systems, or just the chaos of existence. He's asking whether true freedom is possible or whether we're always operating within constraints we can't see. Who's this book for? Well, obviously Foundation fans need to read this. It's essential to the series. But honestly, this works for a pretty broad audience. If you're into political intrigue, mind games, and stories where everyone's trying to outwit everyone else, you'll love this. Fans of intelligent science fiction that prioritizes ideas over action will be right at home. And here's the thing: while this is technically the third book in a series, Asimov does enough recap that you could probably jump in here, though you'd get more out of it having read the previous installments. It's particularly great for readers who enjoy that detective story feel, where you're piecing together clues alongside the characters, trying to solve the mystery before the reveal. Asimov plays fair too. All the information is there if you're clever enough to put it together. Look, Second Foundation isn't just a great science fiction novel. It's a masterclass in how to blend big ideas with compelling storytelling. Asimov takes concepts that could be dry and academic and turns them into edge-of-your-seat entertainment. He creates characters you genuinely care about, throws them into situations where the stakes couldn't be higher, and keeps you guessing right up until the final pages. What really stays with you after finishing this book is that sense of wonder mixed with unease. Asimov makes you think about how much of your life is really your own choice versus how much is shaped by invisible influences. It's heady stuff, but it never feels like homework. It feels like the best kind of intellectual adventure. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more great content. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.